Shalom, and thank you for joining me in the study today. There is so much confusion out there for believers who are new and searching for the true set times of Eloah. They understand the importance of being in His presence at the correct time, and know that Ha-Satan has, as vowed, changed the times of Yahuwah. This is why I decided to do this study today. Even though I have many other studies on the calendar, I wanted to just concentrate on the new year and the key places where truth is found. I see truth seekers on social media throwing up their hands in frustration because of all the different calendars being touted as the one. What is the truth and what is fiction? In today's study, we are going to look at how the new year was determined by the luminaries of the heavens, what Scripture says, and how the priestly order understood it. So let's jump right in and start at the beginning. Genesis 1:14. And Eloah said, "Let luminaries be in the expanse of the heavens, to divide between day and night, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days, and for years." Now the Hebrew word for signs is oath, which means mark or evidence. The Jacinius lexicon defines signs as signs and times, and the Hebrew word for seasons is moed, meaning appointment and fixed time, especially a festival, a place of meeting, or an assembly. Given this understanding, Genesis 1:14 could read, "Let the lights be for signs of time, evidence of time, marks of time, for meeting places, fixed time appointments to meet for festivals and for days and years." All of the Creator's moed have been fixed by the luminaries since Olam time, long before man came along with all of his twisted ways of tracking days, shifting from one calendar to another as they fell out of season. A simple search on calendars will quickly bring to light how many contrary ways man has tracked time throughout history. Some used a 5-day week, others an 8-day week. Even in modern times, there are many different calendars being used for religious and cultural purposes. Today, most of Western society uses the Gregorian calendar, which is tied to nothing. It starts in the dead of winter, and the numbered days, let me say that again, get it in your head, the numbered days wander through its named days. January 1st is not always on a Monday. December 31st is not always on a Sunday. The numbered days wander through the Gregorian named days, causing confusion for those who are looking for the path back to the ancient and true ways of our forefathers and Elohah's division of time. The Creator's timepiece is self-setting. It never falls out of season. This is the perfection of it. The year is established by the luminaries who were assigned that very duty on the 4th day of creation. Through the luminaries, Yahuwah recorded creation for us so that we would never lose track of the original Sabbath day. It is just That's simple. He gave the greater luminary a sign on the fourth day. So we only had to count 3 more days to know when the Sabbath was, which he set apart as a holy day to spend in rest with him. Genesis 1:15. And let them be for luminaries in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth. And it was so. And Eloah made 2 great luminaries, the great luminary to rule the day, and the small luminary and the stars to rule the night. Verse 17, and Eloah set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth. Verse 18, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide between the light and the darkness. And Eloah saw that it was good. Verse 19, and there was evening and there was morning the fourth day. The lights were specifically ordered to shine their light on earth in order to give us information and impart us with knowledge of the Creator's division of time. He gave the greater luminary the sign on the fourth day of creation. Psalms 19, starting with verse 1. The heavens declare the glory of Eloah, and the firmament announces the making of his hand. Day by day they pour forth speech, and night by night reveal knowledge. They pour forth their speech day by day. The sun is marking its way across the heavens, telling us what day it is. Verse 3, there are no speeches nor words which their voices are not heard. Verse 4, into all the earth went forth their knell. Now this word knell means proclamation or utterance. So into the earth went forth their proclamation, and unto the ends of the inhabitable world their words. He put his tent, his tabernacle, in the sun. Now, isn't that an interesting statement? The Creator put his dwelling place in the sun. It is the sun, which is the great luminary in Genesis 1:16, that marks his appointed set times. And it is these set times where our Creator dwells, waiting for us to meet with him. Jubilees 2:8-11. And on the fourth day, he created the sun and the moon and the stars and set them in the firmament of the heaven. This coincides with Genesis, what we just read, to give light upon the earth and to rule over the day and the night, to divide from the darkness. Now here is where we glean a little more information from Jubilees, because he tells us Yahweh appointed the sun to be a great sign. That word again, sign, means marker, to be a great marker on the earth for days and for Sabbaths and for months and for feasts and for years and for the Shabbat of years, for the Sabbath of years, the Shemitahs, and for the Jubilees and for all the seasons of the years. And it divides the light from the darkness, and for prosperity, that all things may prosper, which shoot and grow on the earth. These 3 kinds he made on the fourth day. The sun, the greater luminary, regulates all the appointed times. Now, I'm not saying the moon isn't involved at all. The moon is involved, and the priest used the moon to track the third year tithe, the sabbatical, and the Jubilee years in conjunction with the priestly order. And you can learn more about how the moon was used to keep track of those things in our study called The Moon and the Priestly Order. It's a very interesting study, mostly out of the Dead Sea Scrolls and scriptures, but it tells us exactly how the lesser light was used in its assignment on day 4. So we can see in Jubilees that it was the sun which is appointed the sign on the 4th day of creation. Psalms 19:5. And then the sun, as a groom going forth from out of his nuptial chamber, shall exalt as a strong man running a journey. So let's think about this for a minute. The Creator Yahuwah places his tabernacle, his dwelling place, in the sun, which is as a groom. Therefore, the place where Yahuwah dwells is in the groom. The groom's son, which runs the race, marks his set times, which is where he resides, in his set times. The placement of the tree of life in the middle of the garden gives us more insight to where this nuptial chamber that the sun groom is coming forth from. Genesis 2:9. The tree of life is also in the middle of the garden. Revelation 2:7. The one who has an ear, hear what the Spirit says to the assemblies. To the one overcoming, let him eat of the tree of life, which is in the middle of the paradise of Eloah. The word Eden is derived from Eden, meaning time, a set time, technically a year. Eden in Hebrew is spelled Ayin, Dalet, Nun. And since the Hebrew language is a visual language, let's look at each individual letters to see how they expand on the meaning of this word. Ayin means to see, know, experience, understand, to be seen. Dalet is a door or pathway. It can also mean to enter a path, a way of life, and movement, especially into or out of. And finally, Nun represents action and life. When Ayin and Dalet are written together, it establishes a very important root, which hieroglyphically fosters the idea of time, a periodic return of time, a thing constant by which one can give a testimony or witness. Let me read that again. A thing constant by which one can give testimony or witness. This is telling us that the set times are constant. They are set and fixed in the garden of appointed times. They don't wander through the garden. They are set and fixed, unlike them wandering through the Gregorian calendar, which is not set and fixed. Well, it was set, but not by our Creator. The testimony and continual witness of this actual time garden is set in the fiery menorah of heaven, where they record the way back to meeting with Yahuwah. The Creator placed the bridegroom, that is the Messiah, the tree of life, in the middle of the garden of appointed time. He also began the division of time for meeting with him by assigning the lights in the middle of the creation week, where the sun groom races out of his bridal chamber in the middle of the viewable heavens. Matthew 6:10, as it is in heaven, also on the earth. Ezekiel 44, starting with verse 1. And he brought me back to the way of the gate of the outer sanctuary, facing east, and it was shut. And Yahuwah said to me, this gate shall be shut it shall not be opened, and a man shall not enter by it, because Yahuwah, the Eloah of Israel, has entered by it, so it shall be shut. Verse 3, here's the key verse here. As for the prince, as prince he shall sit in it to eat bread before Yahuwah. He shall enter by the way of the porch of the gate, and by his way shall go out. The prince, groom, son, shall enter the east gate and commune with Yahuwah. The son enters into the east gate, which Enoch calls the fourth gate or portal. This gate is in the middle of our observable view of the heavens. This is the place where the sun starts its journey like a strong man running a race. When the groom is in the middle of the heaven, rising due east out of his bridal chamber, it is here where he proclaims the new year with the first streaks of morning light, marching across the heaven due west until he sets that evening, casting throughout the day his sun sign of the straight line shadow. By the end of the day, the sun has moved completely into the fourth gate, thus marking the beginning of the year on the straight and sure path. We can easily observe how the sun moves into the middle gate when we watch the shadows towards sunset. On both our table observations and our armillary, just before sunset, we can see the shadow drop slightly below the middle line, indicating that the sun is now completely in the middle gate. From the rising of the sun due east on that morning, the first rays of light gives us a straight line. We don't have to wait for midday or any other time. That first ray of light shows us that the line is going to be straight. The sun is facing and marching from due east to due west. From its rising, by the end of the day, it is moving, and it is crossed over into the gate before the sun sets. And we see that confirmation at the tail end of those lights as it drops down. Because from the equinox, the curve is starting to go in a downward shape, what I call the frowny face. We have a smiley face in the winter and a frowny face in the summer and fall. And then it flips in the fall and starts going back to smiley, which I don't know why we have a smiley face in the winter. That would be a frowny face for me. But anyway, let's go on to Ecclesiastes 7, starting with verse 11. Wisdom is good with an allotment and abundance of the ones viewing the sun. Wisdom is good with an allotment and abundance to the ones viewing the sun. This is King Solomon telling us this. For wisdom in its shadow is as the shadow of silver, and the advantage of the knowledge of wisdom will restore life. There's that tree of life. Will restore to life the one having it. Now, interesting that this word silver evolved from a root word which means to make marks. So for wisdom is in the shadow as the shadow makes marks. And the advantage of the knowledge of wisdom will restore to life the one having it. The one having that knowledge of the marks that the shadows are making. Verse 13, look at the work of Eloah, who can make straight which he has bent. Now, King Solomon is still talking about the shadows of the sun. He knew how to read the sun signs and understood the significance of that information. The Creator gave us this sign that is rich in knowledge so that we would never lose the blessed first Sabbath of creation. For it is to be a memorial and the mark of his people. Yahweh's division of time is the one pure thread that runs throughout the heavens. He bestows us with days of worship and days of joy, all the while waiting in his meeting place for us to arrive. We blow the trumpets on these fixed days as a memorial because he's there wanting to commune with us, and we're saying, hey, we're here to be with you. Scripture tells us that we are to begin the year in the spring, the same month as the Passover. Enoch, the scribe of time, instructs us on how to find the sign in the heavens, which were assigned on the fourth day, which determined the start of the new year. From heaven, Enoch viewed the face of the earth and broke it down into 18 parts. This is equivalent to the 180 degrees of half the spherical planet. A circle is 360 degrees. Half of that is 180, broken down by Enoch into 18 parts. Enoch uses those parts or degrees to give us a fractional description on how light and darkness is positioned across our planet on the last day of each month. Since both Enoch and Jubilees tells us that the last night of winter falls on the 364th day of the priestly year, let's start there. Enoch 72, starting with verse 31. And on that day the sun rises from that portal, and sets in the west, and returns to the east, and rises in the third portal for 130 mornings, and sets in the west of the heaven. On that day, now we're talking about the 31st day of the 12th month. So remember, at the end of each quarter, that last month of the quarter has 31 days. Enoch tells us to count 30, 30, 31. And we repeat that through each quarter. The year is divided by quarters and seasons. That's one thing that I think most people miss in the nuances of Enoch, is how he divides the year. Not only by the equinoxes and the solstice, but also by quarter leaders. And those are the intercalary days, are the quarter leaders. We have the seasonal leaders and the quarter leaders. Okay, and he's talking about the quarter leader on the 31st day of the 12th month. And it says, the night shortens. The night shortens. One more time. The night shortens and becomes 9 parts, and the day 9 parts. Then the night becomes equalized with the day. Now the word equinox means equal night versus the word equilux, which means equal day. So the night shortens and becomes 9 parts, and the day 9 parts. Then the night becomes equalized with the day, and the year is exactly as to its days, 364. And the length of the day and of the night, and the shortness of the day and the night, arise through the course of the sun. These distinctions are made. So it comes that its course becomes daily longer, and its course nightly shorter. Okay, so let's break this down. We can see in this verse, first, that Enoch is aware that a day encompasses both the daylight and nighttime hours, as there are 364 complete days, daylight and nighttime, complete Akkad days in a year, 364 complete days in a year. And second, that daylight comes before the night. In his statement that says the length of the day and of the night, and the shortness of the day and of the night. So we can see that he knows, he distinguishes that day comes before night. There's that understanding in this repeated sequence of day and night. We can also discern that Enoch is telling us to look at the nighttime portion of the 364th day, because the night is mentioned first as being 9 parts. Then the day is 9 parts. The daylight part of the 364th day had already passed when the sun moved into the 9 parts position that night. I will show you how that plays out in the physical heavens here in a moment. But first, let's take a look at what Enoch has to say about the sun in the first month. Enoch 72, verse 4. First there goes out the great light, whose name is the sun. Its roundness is like the roundness of the sky, and it is totally filled with light and heat. The chariot of the groom, on which it ascends, is driven by the blowing wind. The sun sets in the sky in the west and returns by northeast in order to go to the east. It is guided so it shall reach the eastern gate and shine in the face of the sky. Verse 6. In this manner it rises in the first month through the great gate. It proceeds through this gate, which is the 4th among those 6 openings which are located in the direction of east. Okay, so in this manner it rises in the first month. What manner would that be? The previous verse tells us that the sun will reach the eastern gate and shine in the face of the sky. This is an idiom that means the center of the sky. This great gate that the sun moves through to enter the first month resides right in the middle of the heavens. He says that after the sun has set on the 364th night, it travels northeast to reach the east gate and will rise through the great eastern gate, which is the opening to the 4th middle gate of the heavens. Recorded in the luminaries, this pattern is repeated from the first week of creation, where the sun and all the timekeeping hosts were set into motion on the 4th day. Enoch 72:7. By this 4th gate, through which the sun rises during the first month, there are 12 open windows from which the flame flows, when they are opened at their appropriate time. Verse 8. When the sun rises in the east in the sky, it goes out through this 4th gate for 30 mornings and descends faithfully through the 4th gate in the western sky. So when the sun rises due east, we start counting 30 days. It's pretty simple. Verse 9. During those 30 days, the day daily becomes longer and the night nightly shorter for 30 days. Okay, it's springtime, it's the first month of spring, and the nights are getting shorter, the days are getting longer and warmer, and the crops are starting to grow, being planted and growing. And so this is what he's talking about. This is where we're at. We're in the spring. Okay, so let's take a look. What I have here is the first picture is the 364th day at sunrise, which would be March 19th, if March 20th is the equinox, which it was this year. So this is what we're looking at, is 2022. So on March 19th, we see the sun rise, and the sun is on the bottom side of that center line. It has not yet crossed or made it to the center east-west line. And then we go and look at sunset on the 364th day, and although it is closer to that center line, it still has not reached the center line. By 3 a.m., or still the 364th day, because the sun hasn't risen yet, a day is from sunrise to sunrise, not midnight to midnight like the Gregorian calendar has it, but from sunrise to sunrise. So this is still the 364th day until the sun rises. We can see that it is now touching the line. The sun is setting itself up to enter the fourth gate. And by 4 a.m., the sun is now at the midpoint line, preparing to show its sign, well, to me in a few hours, with the first rays of light. Now, 4 a.m. in my time zone would be 6 a.m. on the east coast of the United States. And the sun is now into position to show its sign as it shines forth those first rays of light with the new day. So as the sun is rising on the east coast of the United States, or the east coast of Northern America, the sun has gotten into position to shine its first rays of straight light. Okay, so this next picture is March 20th, midday at my location. And we can see that the sun is right in the middle. It is shining its face in the middle of the sky. It's at the east, west, and north-south junction. So that is midday for my location. By 6 p.m., we can see on March 20th that the sun has pretty much crossed over that middle line. By 7 p.m. on March 20th, the sun is completely into the fourth gate. And although at my location it is now dark, so night is now come, again, the opposite here is that in my time zone at 7 p.m., it would still be daylight on the west coast. So in the morning on the east coast, the sun is rising in place. It's gotten itself a few hours earlier in place to rise on that straight line. It's traveled across and now entered into the fourth gate. And even though it's dark at my location, on the west coast, there's still sunlight. So there would still be daylight on the west coast at 7 p.m. And the sun is now fully in the fourth gate, thus completing the sign of the beginning of the year. And this location is Apple Valley, California. Has a little soft spot in my heart. That's where my grandparents used to live. So, but we can see clearly that the day is still light. There's still daylight, and the sun is now in the fourth gate. Thus, we can see that the sun moves into place during the nighttime hours of day 364, emerging at sunrise like a groom running a race marking the first day of the new year, completing his journey in the west as his light diminishes, aligning scripture with Enoch and the fourth day sign of the straight path. One other witness of the straight path new year is the temple gates. Again, as in heaven is on earth. In the first temple era, it was held to be of imperative necessity that on 2 days of the year the sun shone directly through the east gate, and through all the eastern gates of the temple, arranged in line directly into the very heart of the temple proper. The eastern gate, also called the sun gate, served not only to check on the equinoxes when the sun rises exactly in the east, but on the solstices as well. A device on the eastern gate was designed to reflect the first rays of the sun on the summer and winter solstices. The eastern gate of the Temple of Jerusalem was no longer correctly oriented after the cardinal points had become displaced. Apparently, the changes in land, most likely due to earthquakes in the area, necessitated reform. Hezekiah therefore gathered the priests into the east street and spoke to them, saying, "Our fathers have trespassed and have shut up the doors of the porch." 2 Chronicles 29, starting with verse 1. Hezekiah was a son of 25 years when he began to reign, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. He, in the first year of his reign, in the first month, opened the doors of the house of Yahuwah and repaired them. And he brought in the priests and the Levites and assembled them in the east street, and said to them, "Hear me, you Levites, sanctify yourself, and sanctify the house of Yahuwah Eloah of your fathers. Carry forth the filthiness out of the holy place." Now, how did they know that the doors were misaligned? The priests were the timekeepers. They would have been counting, they would have been numbering days, knowing that the day was at hand, but the sign had not shone through the temple doors, would have been obvious to them that something was wrong. That the very design of the eastern gates appears to have highlighted the points of the equinoxes and the solstices corroborates with the apostasy of the temple practices in the time of Yahshua, and that the temple calendar practice was incorrect according to the biblical priestly calendar instructed by Moses, because the equinox-based solar calendar had been replaced by a lunar-based one. Concerning Moses and the equinox, Philo tells us plainly. Moses puts down the beginning of the vernal equinox as marking the first month of the year, attributing the chief honor, not as some persons do, to the periodical revolution of the year in regard to time, but to the graces and beauties of nature, which it has caused to shine upon men. What Philo is indicating here is that the vernal equinox is in the first month, not the 12th month, as some people tend to think, that the equinox is the last day of the year, not the first. And there are some who don't count the equinox day at all. I had somebody tell me it was an abominable day and that they don't even count it. They are starting the year on the day after the equinox due to misunderstanding Enoch's instructions for the 364th day. And I'm not sure how we can have a full 24-hour period without counting it. Ignoring it doesn't make it go away. That makes me think, I see in some teachings where people talk about how man has changed the hour of the day so that the hours of the day have been changed, and they've taken seconds off each day to make a whole nother day. To make this 365th day, it was man's manipulating time. And my question to those who think man created the 365th day by chopping seconds off of each day, and somehow that compiled, and like Play-Doh, they could take a little piece and mold it into one big piece, how they controlled the rising of the sun. That, I don't know how they did. If they can tell me how they controlled the rising of the sun, because when you count sunrises, from equinox to equinox is 365 days. But we're talking about the priestly count and how it overlays the solar count. The priestly count is 364 days, with the equinox being day 1. So yeah, I don't understand how you can just ignore a whole 24-hour period. And why would we want to ignore the sign of the straight path? Why would you call that an abominable day? Instead, choosing to begin the year on a bent path. Do we choose to believe that the Creator's sign for the 4th day was bent rather than straight? The Creator's timepiece is self-setting. It allows for a buffer of days in order to keep the Sabbaths and feasts fixed to their assigned times. The straight path is where it all starts anew. Yahuwah gave a marker that is seen throughout the world that all tongues can understand, so that his people could count their days in one accord. There are some who believe that the marker for the new year is what is called the equilux, and not the equinox at all. Now, an equilux is based solely on time and location, where you are at. Not the sun, the great luminaries placement, but your placement. That's what an equilux is based on, your placement. And not all locations on the planet even have the same equilux day. And there are even some places that do not have an equilux at all. Thus, to keep all his people counting days as one assembly, the worldwide sign of the equinox must be used. Enoch wasn't in the heaven wearing a Timex. He gave us fractional portions of light based on the sun's position to the earth. Not what 2 hands on a clock said. Our eyes can't discern the difference in seconds, but we can discern a straight line shadow. This is why this worldwide sign of the equinox must be used. With the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, many calendrical questions have been answered as to how the early priests of the first temple kept track of days. The temple scroll, for example, gives us a 6-year priestly schedule, listing all the Sabbaths and feast days, affirming that our Creator's days are fixed indeed, counting backwards from any one of these events would lead us back to the fourth day, start of the year. Also, in the book of Jubilees, we are told that Abraham observed the Feast of Weeks on the 15th day of the third month, which is always the first day of the week. The day after counting 7 Sabbaths from first fruits. Sabbath, 7th day of the week. The next day is Shavuot, the first day of the week. Okay? So when we count backwards from the 15th day of the third month being the first day of the week, we end up landing on the first day of the year as being the fourth day of the week with the straight path sun sign. As I said earlier, the priest used the smaller light, the moon, to keep track of the third year tithe, sabbatical, and jubilee years. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, number 4Q320 and 4Q321, we find information that places both the tracking of the sun with the tracking of the moon. Through the priestly order of families, namely the families of Gamuel and Shechaniah, they would track the years of Jubilee according to the moon's metonic cycle and the vernal equinox, which they believed to be the start of the year, and that it was the fourth day of the week, since that was when the luminaries began to mark time. From the scroll 4Q320 we read, "To become visible from the east and shine in the center of the sky, at the base of it, from morning on the fourth of the week of 4, the sons of Gamuel in the first month of the first year." This scroll, along with many others, confirms that the first day of the year can only be placed on the fourth day of the week to start the year when the sun is in the center of the heavens, entering the fourth gate. We can see that Gamuel at the vernal equinox and the new moon started the whole Jubilee count cycle. And it's really quite interesting how they laid it out in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So I highly recommend that you check out that study. But as we can clearly see, witnessed by the word of Yahuwah, his creation and his priests, that the new year began on the straight path sign of the vernal equinox, which is the fourth day of creation. 3 days later is the blessed original Sabbath, and every 7 days until the creation cycle begins anew. To start the year on any other day would be counting days from a bent path, thus making holy days unholy and clean days unclean. 2 Peter 2:15, "Forsaking a straight path, they went astray, following the way of Balaam, son of Beor, who loved the wages of unrighteousness." Psalms 5:8, "Lead me in your righteousness. Because of my enemies, make straight your way before me." Everyone talks about the mark of the beast, but not many speak about the mark of El Elyon, where it is clearly stated that the Sabbath day is his mark. This is why it is so important to understand how to number days according to the ancient ways taught to the prophets, and divorce ourselves from the traditions of men, taking the straight path that leads us into the presence of our Creator and his Messiah, where they dwell in the garden of appointed times. I hope this has answered some questions and brought to light some truths on when we start counting the appointed times of our Creator We want to walk and be with Him in that garden of appointed times, in His presence where He waits for us. So until we meet again, I wish you shalom. Shalom.
Shalom, shalom.